Hi, welcome to Tal Talks, the podcast from the Center for Teaching and Assessment of Learning at the University of Delaware. I'm your host, Rose Moravchik. I'm the Assistant Director at CTAL, and today I'm joined by my colleague, Dawn Burke. Hi, Dawn.
Hi.
Dawn is an assistant professor in mathematical sciences and also the director of the Mathematical Sciences Learning Lab. And for our most recent roundtable, we tackled probably the biggest question we get in CTAL, which is how to make group work. Right. Dun, 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 insert dramatic music, right? So we were thrilled to have you there because you've done a lot of work with actual group work protocol for students, but assessing it also to see what works and what doesn't work. So we want to take our listeners a little bit through the program and start off the same way that you started off, which is, what does the research tell us is effective about group work? Why should we even think about doing this in our classes?
Right, sure. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
So group work is really an example of what we call active learning. Mm-hmm. And there's quite a bit of empirical support for active learning. So the research shows that when you engage students in active learning, which means moving them beyond just passively listening and watching, mm-hmm. but doing something actively engaging with the material, that we see significant and positive increases in their achievement, in their actual learning of the material, increases in their persistence and retention in whatever their course or their major is, mm-hmm. And improvement in their attitudes, their motivation, their self-esteem. Mm-hmm. We also see improvement in feelings of a sense of community in the classroom. So there's really quite a bit of research and support for using any sort of active learning, and in particular group work, in instruction.
I like the way that you frame that in terms of active learning, because I think for most people, we're at the point in our conversation about teaching where we're pro-active learning, mm-hmm. And we tend to think of group work maybe as separate or something much more complex, but really putting it in that framework of something we know is effective, I think takes down some of the anxiety.
Right.
Yeah, this is just another way to get students doing stuff actively in class.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So you've been doing this with your mathematical sciences students.
We have.
Yeah, so how many different kinds of math classes have you been using group work in?
Mm-hmm. So we've been doing this for about 4 years in 3 different what we call foundational math courses at UD. So that's Math O&O, which is intermediate algebra, a pre-calculus course, Math 115, and an integrated calculus course, which is currently a Math 267, an experimental number. In all of those courses, we were really committed to doing everything we can to improve student success. Mm-hmm. And given the strong research support for active learning, one of our key levers for change was moving away from strict lecture in these courses, mm-hmm. and instead engaging students in groups, mm-hmm. giving them chances to actually do mathematics in the classroom while we're there and we can listen and get a better sense of what our students are understanding.
Yeah.
So we've been doing that for 4 years, and in each of our classes we kind of move in and out between group work and then mini lectures or whole group discussions. And each semester we administer a survey to our students because we really care about what their perspectives are and how they're kind of receiving these kinds of changes. And over the years, we've seen students' perspectives improve. Mm-hmm. So the first semester was a little rocky.
Yeah.
We had, student resistance is a common challenge. And so what we learned was the importance of explaining to students, being really explicit with students, why we're doing group work, what the benefits are, that we're really being strategic about this, and it's all about supporting their learning. Mm-hmm. And so over the years, the data I shared last week, we see the great majority of our students really enjoy working in groups in their math class. Yeah. They report preferring it over lecture, and then they articulate, yes, it really does help support my learning of math. It helps me get better at communicating my mathematical ideas. I felt more like the class was a community that I belonged to, mm-hmm. instead of being intimidating. So
one of the pieces of data you presented from these student surveys that I found so fascinating was how students a lot of times feel uncomfortable saying, I don't know the answer, and we see that a lot with faculty we work with. But it seemed like from the survey responses, students felt much more comfortable working in groups when they didn't understand something.
That's right. That's right.
Which is a great benefit for students who are trying something new, or it's a subject. A lot of these math courses, there's a natural kind of aversion to the mm-hmm. course to begin with. And that seemed like a really excellent case for integratedness. If you're worried about students who are not speaking up, who are not telling you they don't get something, that maybe this group situation is a better way for them to get support from their peers.
Exactly. Great point.
Yeah.
Many students report that in our survey, that they feel much more comfortable talking to peers, and admitting they're confused or asking a question than to raise their hand in front of the whole class and say something.
And it also showed that students, in addition to having other people explain concepts to them, actually kind of like liked explaining things to their peers also.
That's right.
I found that to be a little bit surprising too in those responses.
Yeah, they report feeling proud when they're
Yeah.
able to explain something to their group, or they're kind of the leader in a certain situation.
Right. So take us through a little bit of what the group work looks like in one of these missile classes. What are the students actually doing at the table together?
Right. So they do a range of tasks. What I talked about last week that we found are the best tasks for facilitating and really catalyzing good group work have been these tasks that we call kind of work backwards problems,
right?
Where we've kind of flipped the script from the traditional math problem, and that seems to really stimulate conversation. So for example, a traditional problem is we give them a function and we ask them properties of the function. Where is the function increasing and decreasing? Can you sketch a graph? Where are the intercepts? A backwards kind of problem is one in which we give them the properties and then say, now build a graph that has these properties. And just a simple kind of switch like that really seems to stimulate their conversations in groups and then is bringing out the key ideas and making them explicit, and they're having to articulate what those properties mean and how they kind of get enacted in a graph. And that all supports their conceptual understanding of the mathematics.
One of the examples that you showed kind of tickled me because it was a word problem, and we know the students don't always love word problems, but I instantly understood the situation being described and felt like I had a stake more now in what was going on.
Right.
And I imagine that in group work settings, when you bring students together with different backgrounds, you might have that experience also with students working together.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's the second kind of problem we use, which is students are so used to getting an answer in math and then feeling like they're finished.
Right.
The y-intercept is 0,5, or the slope is this. So some of the problems we use in class, we really push them to explain in a contextual situation, what does that mean to say the slope is 2/3? And again, that really stimulates good conversations with students, especially some who procedurally they're in good shape, but maybe in terms of their conceptual understanding, there's work to be done.
Yeah. So obviously we're pretty big fans of group work, but there are a lot of challenges.
Yes.
And we had a lot of discussion at tables, but then also as a group coming together about what some of those challenges are. So what are some things that emerged from our conversation that you think you want to kind of just touch on about the challenges for group work?
Right. One challenge is time demands.
Right.
Engaging students in groups takes more time, and so you have to make hard decisions about, are you just going to not cover as much content, or are you going to push some content outside of class where they can kind of work on it on their own? And we've done a mix in Missile. So that's just one reality of using group work. A second is student resistance, which I mentioned before. Some students, this is their first time doing this, working in groups, especially in a math class.
Yeah.
And so they are skeptical and sometimes uncomfortable having to talk to who might be strangers in their groups. So that's definitely kind of a challenge. A third is just all of the logistical decisions that have to go into, if you want to do this successfully, you have to make decisions up front about the size of the group, the composition of the group.
Right.
Will they stay in the same group all year, all semester, or they switch groups? And then finally, we talked about how critical it is the kinds of tasks that you engage students in groups with. It needs to be at the right level of cognitive demand to warrant working in a group. If it's too easy or too procedural, they're not going to really feel a need to talk to each other. And then have it really clearly connected and aligned with the goals of the course. So students see, oh, I see why he or she's having me do this in groups.
I think that was one of the nice kind of take-home threads throughout the roundtable, was how important the communication lines are from the beginning. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing it this way? How can you explain this to other people in the classroom? And I think that it highlights how individual some of these choices are for different classrooms. So the reason why you want to do group work might be exactly the same as someone down the hall, but the specific ways that you implement it are really going to rely on some factors within the design of your course, the number of students, the level of students, all these other factors.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, the best way to get help for a question like this about how to use group work in your class is, of course, to visit us over in CTAL. Our office is in 212 Gore Hall. We have one more roundtable left for the semester, which is for those of you who've dragged your heels about transitioning to Canvas. Oh, I see a hand raising. We'll have lots of hands-on support for that. And we'll be back in the spring with another full slate of pressing questions that have driven our roundtable's discussion. So thank you so much, Don.
Thanks for having me. This was a great opportunity.
Thanks.